Hello and welcome. Today we begin with the latest updates from Tanzania, where the country's security forces are accused of secretly dumping the bodies of protesters after a wave of election violence that may have killed hundreds. But before we tell you more about that, take a look at these videos. They show what transpired on the streets of Tanzania last week, especially in the country's economic capital, Dar es Salaam, which was most affected by the election violence. For context, let's give you a quick recap of what's happened. On October the 29th, Tanzanians stepped out to vote in the presidential election, but an election without opposition and President Samia Suluhu Hassan's slated victory irked people. The citizens took to the streets to protest an election which they believed wasn't free and fair. This led to a crackdown by security agencies with live bullets and tear gas canisters fired. Those protest videos came out after the government partially lifted its curfew and internet blackout restrictions imposed after the protests. Reports suggest an excessive use of force by security forces to quell dissent. The country's largest opposition, the CHADEMA party, claimed that the crackdown killed more than 800 people. And upping its ante against the Hassan government, the opposition has now accused the security forces of secretly dumping bodies. The party's vice chairman, John Heche, who was arrested on October the 22nd, has also been charged with terrorism.
Other reports that police are going in various hospitals collecting dead bodies of those who were killed during the protests. And we hear some of them are being buried in mass graves.
However, President Hassan and her government have not commented on the death toll so far. Instead, she blamed foreigners for the deadly demonstrations. In her first comments after taking oath as the president of the country, Hassan urged security agencies to ensure that normalcy returns.
Most of the youth who were arrested doing bad things came from outside Tanzania. In order to return the nation to normalcy, the way we used to be, quickly, the Committee for National Security and Regions and Districts, I want them to return the lives of our citizens to normal and to investigate what happened right away.
The election violence has rung alarm bells across the globe. Human Rights Watch has condemned the violent suppression of protesters. It urged Tanzanian authorities to ensure accountability by security forces, citing incidents of point-blank shootings.
Tanzania elections that have just concluded were clearly marred by violence. We've seen reports of abuses by the security forces, killings, the use of live ammunition, as well as tear gas against protesters, as well as the government using very restrictive internet blockades against the whole country, which really made it difficult for information to circulate in the country.
Meanwhile, a regional African bloc released a preliminary report on the election and said that it had fallen short of democratic standards. Others, including the UK, Norway and Canada, have also raised concerns, citing what they say were credible reports of a large number of fatalities. But the mounting global pressure seems to have had little to no effect on the Hassan government, which continues to curtail information sharing in the country. For more on this, we have with us Kanye Mugabeni, who is a political analyst from Johannesburg. Thank you very much for joining us.
A very good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
The Hassan government has acknowledged post-election deaths, but a small number compared to that alleged by the opposition. Do you think that these accusations of bodies being discarded could bring any accountability from the Hassan government?
Well, I think the Hassan government is in denial, but the facts are there. We've seen the dead bodies on the streets. We've seen the build-up to these elections being marred by extreme violence. And as you mentioned, over the weekend, as many as 800 Tanzanians were feared to have been killed. But those numbers are still being verified, even through the mortuary and hospitals, as more deaths are recorded. And what is very clear is that Hassan is an illegitimate leader of Tanzania. She has not not been elected out of a victory that she won fair and square. Her opponents were arrested. CHADEMA has, of course, called it for what it is, and it is a sham. And what is also quite likely to happen is that these violent protests are, in my opinion, are not about to end, because if we look at countries like Kenya, Mozambique, Madagascar, Ivory Coast, there has been a lot of protest around leadership, especially illegitimate leadership that does not reflect the will of the people. And this is becoming a recurrent pattern. Leaders who've been in power and are no longer the people's wish. And we've seen Hassan has, reports are saying that she has used extensive measures to ensure that she wins this victory. And as such, we know that even the information blackout through the internet blockage was trying to prevent Tanzanians from getting the visuals out there, from telling the world what has happened. But it is too little too late. The world is aware of what's happening. But the biggest shock for me, I think, has been the reaction of the African Union, which is a body that has been mandated to give direction and guidance according to democratic standards. And when we say democratic, we mean the will of the people. Countries in Africa should be hosting elections that are free and fair. Observers should be confident that the winners have been elected by the people. So for the AU to go ahead and congratulate Hassan, for me, I think is a big travesty of justice, and it just shows that the people of Tanzania are really on their own right now.
Yes, and let's build on that limited information that has been coming out of the country. We know an internet blackout has now been partially eased, but there still is a limit of information on the protests and response from security forces. What, in your opinion, does that say about the state of democracy in Tanzania?
Well, it's at its lowest. We're in a dictatorship. I think that's where Tanzania is right now. It's a dictatorship because if you have your opponents arrested, if you're having Tanzanians killed en masse, if you're having violent protests and the president simply dismisses them as dissidents from other countries who've come in to cause that disruption. So there's also an element of denial. The government is in denial about what is happening in Tanzania. So we are seeing democratic processes being flung out of the window in favor for more draconian and dictatorship practices, which I don't think, the people of Tanzania actually should tolerate, because Tanzania comes from, a very long history of political stability. Even for us in South Africa, Tanzania was a very critical country in terms of accepting a lot of our political activists who had fled South Africa under apartheid, and many of them found a home in places like Morogoro in Tanzania, where we built schools and institutes, and the people of Tanzania were actually the people that accepted us and shielded us. So as a continent, we have a very important country here, and we're invested in ensuring that Tanzania does not go down into ruins, because that's where it's headed. It's headed into ruins because this violence is going to impact the economic activity, it's going to impact development, it's going to impact the empowerment of those that need it right now. And ultimately, it's going to impact the political stability of the region.
Yes, and Kanye, I'd like to look forward to end our discussion. You've mentioned the African Union, but what comes next from African countries and also international players? This in the face of protests, reported killings, and of course, the political controversy.
Well, I think that the countries, either neighboring countries or international countries, have a duty to take positions and to call it out and to appeal to Hassan, to say you are not the legitimate leader of Tanzania. It is important for countries to take a stand and to put pressure on Tanzania, whether that is by means of sanctions, whether that is by means of appealing to the AU to take a more hardened stance against Hassan and her leadership. I think whatever has to be done to save this country from going into ruins definitely has to be done. For instance, one can only just wonder if there's Western influence that has a hand in all of this, where Hassan is a party and she knows that, you know, she stands to benefit from certain incentives of being in power. So there's all of those things that we have to investigate, whether Hassan is acting of her own will, whether there is a greater influence that has enabled her to win this election illegitimately.
Kanyi, thank you ever so much for that summary and insight.
Thank you.
Want the facts?
The latest developments?
News that gets straight to the point.
Well, we've got all three just for you. This is Firstpost Live, a brand new show, your window into what really matters.
Don't miss it.